discovered is that the FBI really has been covering up everything about 9/11. But lo and behold, if the former FBI director Robert Mueller, who was the director of the FBI at the time of 9/11, and I believe he started that job just a couple months prior, like in June. It may have been less time than that, but it's one of those people that just went into this key position, and he also was one of the lawyers in Wilmer, Cutler, and Pickering alongside of Barbara Olson in that whole thing. William Weld, who also was the governor at one time of Massachusetts, was in that law firm as well. So I'm seeing things that are way beyond coincidence, but then I look to see who some of their clients are at Wilmer, Cutler, and Pickering. Now remember the guy I was telling you about, 9B, the guy who was the trained assassin? Well, he had a company called Akamai Technologies. And it's a communications company, internet, phone, and stuff. And lo and behold, if the client list doesn't start out in alphabetical order with Akamai Technologies, the company that was owned by the passenger sitting on Flight 11 in 9B, the highly trained assassin, and the Sayeret Matkal Special Operations Agent from the Israeli Defense Forces, Daniel Lewin, his company is Akamai Technologies. The second company that's the client of Barbara Olson's law firm that she went to work for is another Israeli company called Amdocs. And if you don't have to look very deep to learn this, Amdocs is an Israeli company. They did phone directories, and they also helped some companies in the United States do billing. They were also monitoring every single phone call for a decade before 9/11. But they missed all the 19 hijackers calling each other. Now there's another company that's also one of the clients. I found this really interesting. It's called Avid Technologies, and Avid Technologies specializes in video and audio production technologies. And one of the things that they specialize in is digital nonlinear editing, NLE. And it's very similar to cutting and pasting. And if you watch any NFL football games, you can see that the line of scrimmage that they show in a bright yellow or orange color, or the advertisements or the team's logos on the field, those are not visible if you're live in the stadium. That is live audio nonlinear editing.
So it's editing in real time.
That's correct. And so I'm finding this really interesting because people keep asking me, how did they make that airplane look like it went through that building? And you remember seeing it, so like the wings sort of disappear right into the building. This is impossible because the wings are hollow, aluminum, and they have some fuel tanks in there, but they cannot slice through a steel building. A couple interesting companies that are clients for the same Barbara Olson law firm, Boeing, Citigroup, Credit Suisse, Deutsche Bank, they were kind of right there, HSBC Finance, which is also a CIA bank, UBS. And they also worked and represented, they did some investigative committees for the board of directors for Enron and for WorldCom. Remember, they were both in Building 7. And so this is just Barbara Olson's law firm connections to some of the things about 9/11. Now, okay, so one more step with Barbara Olson. She came out of law school. She married her husband, Ted Olson. Ted Olson was the attorney for the Israeli Mossad spy, Jonathan Pollard, who is still sitting right now in prison in the United States. So do we need any more connections to Barbara Olson and the Mossad?
It's fantastically incestuous, isn't it? It's like it all kind of loops around itself in this big tangle. I mean, it's the most extraordinary web.
It really is, and that's what I did with the methodical deception. I wanted to find out, Bill, where did people go that were in positions to stop this supposed attack? Where did they go after they were finished, after, let's say 2002 or 3 or 4, as they moved on in their careers? And the connections to people, and how was it that the Boston airport had no cameras at all in it? How could that possibly be? I flew out of that for a while. So I'm like, well, you just naturally assume when you do this professionally, you just naturally assume that they have done all of the things that keep you and the passenger safe from this kind of stuff. Another interesting connection I looked into was the woman who was the head of the FAA at the time, the FAA administrator. And lo and behold, she'd been the director of Boston Logan International. And the director of Boston Logan International, that was the director at the time of 2001, had taken that job as a young 30-something. She'd been working for William Weld, also from Barbara Olson's law firm, who was the governor. She was his chief of staff and his campaign coordinator as a young lady. And they put her in position of director of, it's called Massport, or they carry all the transportation stuff out in Boston. And so she gets to work in the spring of 1999, and she discovers that none of the predecessors, directors in front of her, had ever put cameras in the passenger terminal. So she makes public that by the end of 1999, she guaranteed there would be working cameras in the airport terminal. But yet on September 11, 2001, there was not one working camera inside Boston Logan. So we don't know who the terrorists were, because there were 19 Arab hijackers on any of the real passenger manifests. That's only a claim made by the FBI. And so we don't know. We don't know who the passengers were. We don't know what they really looked like because there were no cameras. Well, I looked into her. Her name was Virginia Buckingham. She coincidentally is married to a gentleman who's an attorney and a judge who spent his summers in Israel in kibbutzes, and his name is David Lowy, L-O-W-Y. You'll remember Larry Silverstein's partner in the World Trade Centers is Frank Lowy, L-O-W-Y. No connection that I know of, just a coincidence again. So I found this really interesting. And then every year for that airport to be functioning legally, she would have to take her security plan, which would show no cameras, in front of Jane Garvey, the head administrator of the FAA, and get approval to keep that airport operating, which she did in 1999, in 2000, and again in 2001. So I found that was very interesting that the FAA administrator would know this, and all of this planning is taking place. Most of the corporations involved in this were based in Massachusetts as well. And an interesting coincidence about Jane Garvey's husband, he just so happens to be the sheriff for one of the counties that surrounds nearly half of Westover Air Force Base. So if the eyewitness who contacted me after she read Methodical Illusion had called 911 and contacted him about this airplane that was way too close to the ground, that she could see people in the window and not where it should be, she could have been silenced or maybe just ignored. It's hard to say how they might have handled it. And it's also hard to say if other people did make that phone call, because this aircraft, I followed it. I had the flight plan in the Freedom of Information Act data. And so I knew that it was on a southerly track. And when she contacted me, and she told me where she was, and I got on a Google map and looked, and I knew exactly what time. And when she said exactly what time it was, and she knew that's because she was leaving on an appointment, that I knew that she was speaking the truth, because I had followed that aircraft. And if we have time, I'd love to just read you this. I changed her name in the novel, but this is near the end of the Methodical Deception. This is her statement. This is a notarized affidavit that's legal in a court of law, and she's willing to go to court to share this word. My name is Sarah Swain. That's not really her name. And I was living in Otis, Massachusetts on September 11, 2001. At approximately 8:30 to 8:35, I saw a United Airlines plane fly over my residence at the time, and I was shocked because the plane was so low. I could see the people in the windows. And I was standing on a deck on the second floor, and I was watching the plane fly over the top of the house, and I lost track of it because of the way the building was, but I do think it was going north when it flew over the house, and after I lost sight of it, I was speaking with my neighbor, and we were just amazed at the height of the plane. It was so low. I shouldn't say height, meaning altitude. It was just so low. We were flabbergasted. Now I know that it was approximately 8:30, and I would say 8:45 at the very latest, because I had to go to an appointment in the next town over and be there by 9:30, and I left maybe 5 minutes after the plane and headed over to Great Barrington, the next town over. Now, she lived with us for 14 years until she read Methodical Illusion. And she called me. She emailed me, said, please call me. And so I called her. She said, you have vindicated my life. For the last 14 years, people had told me I was crazy because she went to that appointment and she knew that she was going to come out and hear of this airplane crashing north of Otis, Massachusetts. And what she heard was that 2 planes hit the towers in New York, and 1 hit in Pennsylvania, and 1 hit in Washington, D.C. It didn't work with what she'd seen. So there is a signed affidavit of a person who was an eyewitness to what really happened on 9/11.
It's very chilling, isn't it? It's chilling and it's moving. And as you said, it just strikes you when you hear that. And at the same time, it makes you wonder who else hasn't yet spoken up, who saw things, who witnessed things, who knew things. And there's this huge web of accomplices in this at a senior level. I mean, there must have been thousands of people who were in on this whole thing, and it must have been elaborately planned for quite a long time, even though there were many holes in the execution of this. This was a very complicated thing that they tried to pull off here, and an awful lot of people must have been involved.
You know, I think in a project like this, I think people might have been involved but not know what they were involved in. Another interesting thing happened after Methodical Illusion came out. My publisher got a phone call from some people, and he and his wife had been somewhere on vacation, and they met a couple. He was a Navy man, and his wife had actually been in the Pentagon the morning of 9/11. He said, well, when my wife comes back, let her tell you her story. Here's her story. It was an hour or 2, I'm not quite sure exactly, but at least an hour, if not 2, before anything hit in New York. She was at work at her office in the Pentagon, and her phone rang, and a voice she does not know to this day who it was said to her, get the hell out of the Pentagon and get out of there now, and hung up. She grabbed her purse and her belongings and got out of that building. And then the rest of the day unfolded. People knew in advance, and for some reason, whoever made that phone call to her didn't want her to be killed. She doesn't know who that was, but it does tell us that people knew in advance. Well, knowing that, it drove me to continue digging into who could have stopped it, the connections that they had with the companies, the state of Massachusetts, and the whole, when I discovered that the head of the FAA's husband was the sheriff of the surrounding county, I couldn't even believe what I was reading. I was like, oh my God. Then if somebody saw something, there is a chance that they may have disappeared. It may not have been followed up on. There's a couple things that I kept finding, and a lot of people kept asking me, Bill, is why were the passenger loads, so light those days on all 4 aircraft? Do you know if they'd been full, like most flights were, and often are still to this day, those planes each hold roughly 200 people, a little more, a little less. So they would have had 800 bodies to take care of instead of the 260-ish. So there's something that kept driving me too, because all of our flights were full at that time, and that was one of the things I saw right at the beginning was, wow, those loads are just weird low, very strange, abnormally low. So that told me that somebody had access to the phone lines at the airlines, at United and American. They had to have. And in Methodical Illusion, I discovered this in an FBI document. There was a purser who was living in Miami. Most airline people know how this works. And we commute from coast to coast. I was commuting from the East Coast to the West Coast for many, many years. And so for us, we look at, so it's only 3 hours away. I mean, even if maybe it's on the other side of the planet, it's only 3 hours, 6 hours, 5 hours. So, you know, we have people that commute from all around the world. And this lady was living in Miami, but flying out of Boston. And she was assigned on September 9th to fly Flight 11. On September 11th. And so she commuted up to Boston, got to a hotel, checked in, and the crew scheduling said to her, oh, we found a different person to take that flight. And well, that's not possible. Once you're assigned a flight, nobody takes you off of it. If that flight's operating, it's yours, and you get locked into it. So nobody can quite figure out how or why that happened. But what's really odd, and this is word for word from what I got from an FBI document, and no one ever talked about this elephant in the room either, because it indicates that their phone lines at American Airlines had been tapped. The airlines keep our phone number and our information very, very private. So to have this lady get home, she went back to Miami on the morning of 9/11. She probably took a 6 a.m. flight out of there, got into Miami, got home, and around noontime, on her home recorder was a message, and it was two gentlemen speaking perfect English, like the guy in 9B did. He grew up in Denver. Not saying it was him, just bringing that back to your attention. And a woman with a very heavy accent, and his wife actually does have a very heavy accent. And she could hear them say, if this had anything to do with Israel, there'll be backlash against the Jews. She called, of course, the FBI, and they came and confiscated her tape recorder, and we'll never, ever hear it after that, because that's what the FBI did with everything, including 85 cameras that were in view of whatever it was that hit the Pentagon. And those cameras were confiscated by the FBI within 30 minutes of whatever it was that hit the Pentagon. So that told me, because there's no way these handlers and the lady with the heavy accent could have known her home phone number without somebody tapping into the phone lines.
Oh shit. The invincible CNN. The unstoppable CNN, Lebanon, Bosnia, Kuwait, Iraq, Syria,
yo, Ice Pick, Arabic, Saudi Arabia, my click won't dick, grip shit like WrestleMania, so double stain, president of what I claim, still the same name, cause of this shit like I'm on the plane, the maintain, getting this cream with blood stain, 252, cause the crew's stuck in the game, accordingly, you verse me and try to slaughter me, the door is locked, top locked up, bad luck, come out the elevator, K-tone like nigga what, Arab Nazi, play the low, get Coca-Cola, what up though, 151, we smoke Joe, bound bag, tons of hash get smoked, yo that real shit, probably make you bleed down your throat, did joke, coughing up the murder I wrote, I smoke spanky, hit it hard, mega hard, then burn it down, under the ground, around guard, I ripped it, bitch on my dick, that I presented, diploma, keep it wide open and Tony Roma, back shots, Holiday Inn, I'm about to own her, cold owner, drop her off inside Corona, with pistola, call me tomorrow on the roller, the iron solar, strike back, you just a soldier.
For them thug niggas holding their gats and never scared, I'm prepared, every day get bent on biz, play they corner close, quick to jump on a toast, that shot, take your knot, done and get ghost, white talk frontin', walk frontin' like a villain, saw something, so hot, what a feeling, Mo with the ice chillin', roll dice, make a killin', wanna see twice a million, no love for a cop civilian, makes a lot in the spot kneeling, 4 second freeze dealing, back to business, pump till the pack finish, stacks finish, mad bad crash runners, floating off the rip something, air like twist something, Henny got my shit sunken, stay drunken, with a bop, holding your tie, push your D drop, yeah the game don't stop, let the beat drop, bring it back to the top, this for them thug niggas, chicks and hard rocks, street to cell block, rock the Comstock, moving like a flock of Arabs and warlocks.
Walking on blocks of 4-carat stone, infrared chrome. In Kuwait, I awake, skull and crossbone. In my own zone, Motorola flip phone. The infrared on the Georgia Almighty specs. Blowing jacks at the opposite sex. For the 6-figure check, my slug and jacks. When the guard lay to rest, my seed is next. I was blessed with a thug's caress. In the dime's finesse, titanium chest and bubble vest. Titanium chest and bubble vest. My pop's dead, now it's too late to warn me, inform me. These wanna plant keys on me. Eternally I wanna sleep without the venom of a snake nigga trying to creep. Stakes is high and the thug's blood runs deep. The Jakes wanna see me laying under 6 feet. And so it seems now my team broke against me. They can't stop my money moving too intensely. Gaddafi, I plant bombs with a fence beat. I'm like Moses in the middle of the Red Sea, with infrared in the case full of 100G. Leading my thugs to the land of Kiami, with no cop, pure gold growing on the tree. Arab Nazi, Tommy Hiller night song, guerrilla rap song. Yeah, CNN, guerrilla rap song. I'm up for 2 nights, sweating like Peruvian cats, pulling a Jew heist. Battle of the beast, defeating niggas for 5 nights. I'm too nice, like a Christian, fed with 2 lives. The embassy, type of rap cat, pushing the black act, aristocrat. Throw Guerrilla diplomat, I'm deep like a Socrates, foul like atrocities. My degrees date the BCs, 12 dynasties, a member of the Last Supper, original disciple, an archangel like Michael, holding a rifle. So what the fuck you trying to tell me like Drew Hill? My net gross is 4 mil, nigga, it's all real. Clear like the waters in the blue now, it's too foul. Got the drop on you, Dunny, what you gonna do now? Yeah, shit is too foul, shit is too foul. What you gonna do now?
This world is foul and we get high. That's why we're steady.
That's why we get high. Yeah, this shit got me thinking. It's too much, check it, yo. Yeah. Alright.
There's a SHAREfactory switch down.
Yeah.
These militants stick together.
Bye.
Fuck those guys.
What it be? Long Grizzly. You know what I'm saying? Gaddafi. What? Yeah. Shut it. Yeah. What? Yo. That real shit, you know what I'm saying? Be more dark. Bursting out the cocoon like that. You know what I'm saying? Apples just dropping from the tree. That's how I thought. You know what I'm saying? Yo. I be the last man standing in the middle of a major war. BC, cavemen and dinosaurs. Lords, warring like bonds of yours. They got some type of shit they put up in them fucking drawers. Gotta fill them out, figure out the major flaws. Thinking I can catch one in the back of mega halls. See my face posted in about 100 stores. Missing, last seen at the lab convention. Sound warp coincides with the mic cord. Savage, beast, eat straight meat. Savage, beast, eat straight meat. We like Neanderthals trapped in ice to be precise. Microchip in your body like blood of Christ. I fast 40 days and pray for 40 nights. Return to the essence of life for all life. Conceived in the earth and placed upon walls. Resting in the pyramid, wake when night falls. Bless me with the gas and clips to be injected. To the next life and change my whole perspective. Slaughtering my children, Gentiles and Romans. I'm holding sword and gas for evil omens. Mark up the beast and print will be exploding. To the last day they say world exploding. 1999, unrefined. Internet web control your whole mind. My third eye shine in sight to lead the blind. 144,000 more crimes. Fugitives wanted by feds of all kinds. For waking up thugs and showing them true signs. True signs for the blind. True light, forever shine. Yeah, the next light. Yo. Been on this planet for 25 years and still bleeding. Eternally trapped in hell but still breathing. Caught up in the Empire State Garden of Eden. Millennia surround my life for wrong reasons. I didn't ask to be here, God, see I was placed amongst Canaanites with 6 carved in face. Rolling all the guards up north behind gates. Amorites ruling the world in all states. Lies coming from tongues of true snakes. La ilaha illallah, illallah. The one us the bar, we shine like North Star. See yeah, forever. The red money, Iron Sheets, Gaddafi. The next life, Agent 25. What? Yeah. Officially coming through. 5-2. DJ Clue. Sample of Guerrilla Coalition. Strong arm and the rap industry. What? Yo. Politically aware for all the DJs out there. Greg G. Yo. SNS. God. What? Gaddafi. Officially next life. All the DJs. Paradise. Yo. Put this in your cassette and get your thug on. Word up, alright? The new joint coming through. Gaddafi, Imam Thug, 40 D's, Iron Sheets, Still Hands. Word up, band together. Rap Alliance. Yeah. New World Rap Cats. Third World Gorilla Cats. Yeah. Laser Beam Gats. Thug Paradise. Yeah. 5 carat ice. What?
I got this.
Studio banging. What? Yeah. Yeah. Alright, yo. Who you with? 158. Yeah, check it. Yo.
Good to go.
Done. Check it, son. Yo. Where that Henny at? Where that Henny at, son? Where that weed at? Yeah. Where that weed? Where that bogey at? Where that bogey at, son? Where that Henny at? How we do? Yeah. What? 252. Check it. Yo. Run the Dutch. 252. Tony Touch. Pack it like Madison Square Garden Garden. More lines kept in storage. Get your porridge. Wise man, turn this up and don't ignore this. Pour this down your box until the beat knocks. 2-5 lot shit. We're matching lot. Yeah. Hold that. You catch a contract. You want my jack. Hit and miss you contract. Bring it back. Gaddafi get it smacked. Queensbridge loading the gas. You want that? Yeah. 50 MCs to please your ear. You look and stare at live shit. God dead. 850 bucks to your ride. We poppin'. 25 to life in this shit. No stopping. What? Yeah. Where that weed? Where that Henny at? Where that Henny at, Don? Where that weed at? Where that weed at, Don? Where that bogey at? Yeah. Check it. Yo, you ain't a thug. Screaming at the sight of your own blood. I run up in the spot and take everything you love. Masked and gloved it, the way we dubbed it, you loved it. Lost like an innocent child soon as the slug hit. Thug shit, wild like Geronimo Pratt. Out the sawmule, stand right in front of your gat. Yo, for real though, niggas tryna fuck with my PC. It's real though, you can get smacked back to BC. While I burn lot in DC, with Hashi, Team B, steady extremely. Islamic, atomic, rip mics like Prophet Muhammad. Gaddafi, the Iron Shiki, move creepy, get left leaky. Doing hits and dashiki. My style be mucho grande, El Producto. Tony touch those DJs, hit them with crossbows. Arab Nazi, blow holes in your mosquitoes. 800 gold past that, you know how we go. Iman bomb to the last day when we all blow. Yeah, you know how we go. So what? Yeah, 2-5 in the cut. Yeah, laying up. Desert man, what? Iron G's, still hands, in demand. Yeah, popular. Yeah, extravagant, rap, militant, gorillas, 2-5, 825, CNN, keep it live, Tony Touch, nigga what? Yeah, in your gut, Arab Nazi, Yo, crossbreed, 2-5, Arab C, my light speed, that's why we all smoke weed. Thug mom be inside of the livest niggas. All the war was designed by the wisest killers. Wrote the thug book, only the truth gets spit. Took my hooks like you wrote that shit. Foul bitch, tell them niggas how you rock my jewels, rock my clothes. Yo, I aim red dot when I spot my foe. Taught you how to spit, taught you how to breathe on beats. If it wasn't for me, you'd probably be on the street. Fucking up Pat, niggas coming at you with gat. Same nigga at the show you got watching your back. We can shoot out on the roof till we fall in the street. Draw heat and clap till our bodies in the floor meet. Eat your food like animal dog. Raw meat, say my name if you want more beef. I don't associate with niggas who switch. Fake thug like Sammy the Bull. Turn snitch, yo my Glock kick, ready to spit. Foul shit, putting bullet holes all in your clique. Who you with? All my niggas live a thug life. I can't fuck with niggas if they ain't my blood type. If I don't get you with the knife, then the slug might. Before you bring a nigga in, know his blood type. All my niggas live a thug life. I can't fuck with niggas if they ain't my blood type. If I don't get you with the knife, then the slug might. Before you bring a nigga in, know his blood type. What's your blood type? Allahua, blaze y'all with Naruga. Capital, stay tuned. I'll be back soon. Mati, 252, Munafikun. When the grass low, all them snakes will show. Like the niggas in your team that's starving to blow. Like the sweet thug on Oz, HBO. Fucking with any clique that's ready to blow. Hot night, catch you backstage, stop your show. Tie you up in the back of the row. They know. I tie you up in the back of the row. And you know. Yo, Father Rule, blood in, pie rule. Then I rep set 252, guard you. Time zone, born alone, die alone. Yo, I blaze any nigga with chrome. In my zone, be the blind justice. Automatic, yeah, never trust it. Only revolvers, climax when I bust it. Air like me, one and the same. True hustlers, we understanding the game. 2-5, be my set, so a set you claim. My niggas bleed through similar veins. We like blood type, one and the same. We like blood type, one and the same. All my niggas live a thug life. I can't fuck with niggas if they ain't my blood type. If I don't get you with the knife, then the slug might. Before you bring a nigga in, know his blood type. All my niggas live a thug life. I can't fuck with niggas if they ain't my blood with the knife than a slug might. Before you bring a nigga in, know his blood tight. What's your blood type? Air light, that mean true to the game. West Coast thugs, my niggas like one and the same. Just like East Coast, yo, we one and the same. Niggas bleed through similar veins. We like blood type, one and the same. We like blood type, one and the same. Tell them niggas who the father to your style is. Yo, you started off winning the race, but lost mileage. Formulas, crime science. Bow down to something far greater. Maki, royally your highness. Queen's finest. Buck your all-star lineup. My Artie play, tear your spine up. Get my shine up. Artie play, tear your spine up and get my shine up. Cue me in on the 8.
Price are you talking about, sir? The price of freedom is death. Death.
Yo, only one sperm cell survives out of millions. Hustle and strive. The trades we learn by the buildings. In Hell's Kitchen, projects burn the children. Some get locked, lay in the box with no feeling. On my back, staring at the ceiling. Through dealing, sweat dripping, hands together, my knees kneeling. Where was God when my pops fell to his death bleeding? Was he trapped like Martin in his last cry for freedom? And when I die, will my soul ride till I see him? Never thought that I'd be overseas with Koreans, rocking a vest, pushing bulletproof Europeans and Hot Wheels. Spit shit the crowd could feel, spending chips on halal meals, gripping foul steel, while snakes come behind me to lace my spine. Say grace and at the same time embrace my nine. We ball like ghetto children in life tournaments, lusting for platinum chains and ice ornaments. I strive for what I live for, cut from an iller cloth, plot like Hyman Roth in the law. Stack chips before the new millennium curse. You and I verse, the true and living heirs to the universe. Rep the 41st till my heart bursts, ready to die till we seen Biggie riding a hearse. Yo, your comrades moving like wolves in sheep's clothing.
If you can't hold on, hang on, niggas, cause they make it. Whatever they don't give us in this life, we can take it. It's all your pain, through the sunshine and rain. As the world turns, life remains the same. We escape through the flames in this game we play. Pour some liquor on the ground, God bless the day. So my niggas still living, yo, hold your head. So my niggas still living, yo, hold your head.
I flow shots from a drop rover till the world's over. Seeing Jehovah through the eyes of a young soldier. Black Moses, literature and pure dosage. From a landscape of Kuwait, jakes and vultures. Too many of us lose focus due to the fact that we all just a bunch of soldiers. Foul coaches, funny how the streets mold us. Allah told us, in the cages where they hold us, it's much colder. Hear the pain through my words as I harbor in song. See the world's rotten like the veins in my father's arm. Used to be a follower of Islam, niggas is shice. Study my life, living in these days is tripe. Heaven and hell, a thin line between paradise. Rather than lose, some choose to take their own life. Said a prayer for him, hoping that his soul was blessed. Cause my hands couldn't cover all the holes in his chest. What they do, turn around and blame me for his death. I'm like Malcolm X, resurrected in the Lex, holding two texts, holograms in the headrest, yo. Shoulda knew what love is before we learned what a thug is. Now we lead the seeds to be raised by their mothers. I seen the hood raise brothers, kill too many of us. A thin line between the freedom and the foul judges. In the streets where them snake niggas hold grudges.
If you can't hold on, hang on, we can make it. Whatever they don't give us in this life, we can take it. Joy and pain, through the sunshine and rain. As the world